It's time to talk Gonzaga basketball.
Get ready.
It's the Spokesman-Review Zags Insiders Podcast.
Here we go.
Here's Jim Meehan and Richard Fox.
Good Monday morning. Welcome back to the Zags Basketball Insiders Podcast. Jim Meehan, Spokesman-Review. Richard Fox, television analyst on SWX and KHQ for Gonzaga basketball. Another 40 minutes or so to recap the week and what's ahead for the Zags. They went 2-0 last week, two 13-point wins, if I remember right, over San Diego and Washington State, both at home. Don't get used to that. They don't have a ton of two-game homestands or two-game road trips for that matter. I think the one at the end of the year might be the only one. But it was nice to be back for a while. Zags get back on track, and they were 18th in the AP poll last week. I think they'll climb a spot or two with people losing in front of them during the week. Stayed at 10 in the net, dropped to 11, but actually moved back up to 10. Washington State stayed at 75, makes that a quad 2 win against the Cougars. St. Mary's is 32 in the net, very much shaping up as Gonzaga St. Mary's battling at the top, but a lot more depth in this conference this year with Washington State, Oregon State, San Francisco, and Santa Clara. Santa Clara visits on Saturday, so that'll be a quality game as well. You've got Oregon State at 57. That's next up for the Zags Thursday in Corvallis. Foxy, there's going to be there's a little more depth at the top this year. I think we're going to see a lot of games like the WSU game, probably like Oregon State on Thursday, that are they're going to be a battle, and games that can either strengthen your resume or hurt it in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, the addition of Oregon State and WSU certainly strengthens the top half, and I think we may have been. It's easy to get lulled, I think, a little bit given the softness of Gonzaga's schedule to start conference play, but you certainly got a feel for what the top half of the league when you think of St. Mary's, San Francisco, Santa Clara. Now you add WSU and Oregon State, who, you're not adding San Diego State necessarily to the league, but they have more traditional, high major, or higher end mid-major bodies, players, and we'll get into the WSU game, but certainly got a feel for. I got the sense that they had Coward and Watts healthy, that's probably a tournament team, and I think it's going to be certainly a challenge in a month or so when they go down to Pullman, but. Schedule's getting a little bit more real right now. This is going to be a different week than they've had the first couple.
Yeah, no question. In terms of bracket projections, again, this is like information only because it's so early still, even in mid-January here. Joe Lunardi's last bracket, which is several days old, I think it was maybe before Saturday's games. The Zags were a 5 seed in Seattle at Climate Pledge, and if they won that game, they would play Kentucky, a 4 seed back in the Climate Pledge. Not sure the reality of that's happening, but just throwing that out there. Jerry Palm has the Zags also in Seattle. I think he has them as a 4 seed. St. Mary's is in most of the brackets, more or less in the 10-11 range. Arizona State, one of the teams the Zags beat, is in that last one in, last one out area. So the Zags still have some quality wins on their resume and more to try to build as you go through this WCC schedule. Well, let's go back through the week that was. We've got San Diego was first up. Not the most exciting first half we've ever witnessed, Foxy. A little sleepy on both ends, but eventually the Zags did take care of business in that game. Maybe one of the reasons for it being not maybe Gonzaga's finest effort of the year was just that they've got flu running through this team. They had Michael Ajayi out. They had June out. They had Ryan Nemhard playing and throwing up at halftime is what they told us.
Yep.
I didn't see Zach Norvell on the bench. He told me he had the bug and didn't want to be around the guys. And then same thing with Steele Venters, who's hurt. He wasn't at the game. I assume he probably had a sickness to deal with as well. So they're trying to keep that limited and get it on, get through it and get on. But you saw Ben Gregg play a lot of minutes in that game, and good thing, because I think he had one of his best games of the year with 23 points. Nemhard battled through it, and I believe had a double-double again, 11 and 11. I give a lot of credit to USD. Thought they played pretty hard. Thought they battled. I thought KJ Bradley was as advertised, put up 21. Pretty nice guard. Gets in the lane, can finish a little bit. Hit a 3, I think, against the Zags, maybe 2. What'd you see, Foxy? I know it wasn't as big a blowout as everybody thought it would be, but I never really thought they were in any kind of trouble either. What did you see calling that game?
Yeah, I agreed. It wasn't, didn't feel like San Diego had the kind of run they needed. Every time they had a mini run, Gonzaga seemed to just answer it and not necessarily extend it. I've heard the same as you. Whatever's been going through the team has been pretty nasty and impactful. So, that I think helps explain why they just weren't able to pull away. San Diego gets 80 points on Gonzaga. Shot fairly well from the 3-point line. I was really impressed with Bradley. I mean, comes off the bench now in conference play. I hate to say it, but I was wondering, I'm wondering a lot while I'm calling the game. I wonder where he's going to play next year. But
it's like an audition.
It's great. I mean, honestly, that's the first tape he's going to send. I mean, create his own shot, has good quickness. I loved his swagger. It's a little different hollering at the older crowd than it is the kennel, but he was having fun. And then Pierre's a really good looking player. I mean, he's big. I mean, he's a solid 6'7", 6'8", has some size to him. 5 of 12 from the field. So those two guys got going. And Truitt, the kid out of Argentina, same thing. I'm wondering where he'll play next year. He only started playing basketball a few years ago, but all a 6'9". A very, very interesting prospect. But sometimes you just got to win those games. I was really pleased for Ben. When you think about where he was shooting the ball going into that game, and it's just nice to see him make some shots. 3 of 3, very efficient. I thought Battle was good. Quite frankly, I think Battle's been tremendous in conference play. You look at what he's done. He's averaging over 17 a game, and he's just shooting a really efficient percentage, taking good shots, 50% from the field, 43% from 3, takes about 6 a game, but not forcing it. I mean, maybe one against WSU, it felt like he forced it on a drive, but other than that, I mean, he's really balancing being really aggressive while not disrupting what they're trying to do offensively. And Ike, I mean, it was just it almost got comical. He was 1 of 5, but he drew so much attention, but he got to the line 13 of 15. He's been knocking those down. His effort on the glass, 19 rebounds. I thought it was the performance they needed. I don't know if we need to belabor it much. That was a team that was not at full strength. And I thought you saw a little bit of that bleed into the WSU game. I didn't think Michael looked quite right in that game, and it felt like in the first half, Greg and I, Heister and I, were talking off air. Like, I wonder if Hickman's still not feeling well, or rather Nemhard. Exactly. And speaking of Hickman, obviously fabulous against WSU, but really struggled against San Diego. So I think it's one of those things. You took care of business. It wasn't the prettiest thing in the world. You just turned the page, and I thought they did a good job of turning the page and getting ready for WSU, who's a very good team.
We're talking about the flu now. I think several weeks ago they were battling kind of the cold cough thing that I seem to have perennially here.
Right.
I know Nolan was one of those guys. When he didn't start, maybe the UCLA game.
Yep.
I think he was really battling that the days leading up to the game. And you could hear it when you talk to guys. They just have that same sound that I got, that same congestion. So they're through that. Let's see if they can get through the flu. Mark Few did call the San Diego game. Just one of those kind of games. And it was, times where they played very well, looked connected, and then just times where they, were scratching their head. What are we doing out there? I shortchanged KJ Bradley. He had 3 threes in that game. Didn't miss many 2-point attempts. I'll tell you that. He was very good inside. Impressive player.
He's not only had some quickness, but shifty plays.
Yeah.
North-south, but also, laterally, he'll curl around a ball screen and start dribbling towards the sideline and just able to get his shot off. He's not very big. I mean, he's not undersized per se. I mean, he's, I thought he was 6'1" or so.
Yeah,
it's not as if he's a 5'7", 5'10", point guard, but, and he's, good athlete. Easy to see him playing at a higher level. Interesting they bring him off the bench. I mean, he still played 36 minutes a game. Started him in the second half. And we heard that he was also under the weather going into the game. So it's not just Gonzaga this time of year that's going through it.
Well, San Diego had another kid out, Jamerson, one of their better players. I think they're scorer. Had the flu too. So, let's move on. Washington State was next up. Game everybody was kind of looking forward to. They haven't played in almost a decade. And the Cougars, lost some luster, I have to say. You lose it overtime to Pacific on Thursday at home. First conference loss. I think everybody was anticipating this being a showdown of WCC unbeatens. Didn't happen. I think they gave up 40-something to a kid from Pacific, Washington, that hit a 3-pointer to win it. First half, I thought, was very entertaining. Good battle, back and forth. You could see the wheels were turning. WSU really wanted to pound it inside to, I think, Eric Strip was the kid's name, 6'10"ish. And Caleb Battle was battling him defensively, giving away about 5-6 inches. And first play of the game, they throw it into him. He scores. Next play of the game, they throw it into him. He fumbles it, and it's a turnover. And the Zags kind of got a better grip on that as the game went on. You saw Nolan Hickman guarding Watts, who is 6'6" for WSU. I think at times Nolan was guarding 6'10" guys inside. He did a very good job at that. Yep. Have to give him credit for the battle he showed in that game. WSU kind of wanted to exploit some of those size advantages. Very similar to what you're going to see against Oregon State Thursday. Big team, big wings, 2 bigs inside that are pretty good. And LMU had that. I think even Portland has a pretty sizable lineup that they tried to throw at Gonzaga. And so far, the Zags have held up in those. And you're going to see it again Saturday, as I mentioned. So the trade-off when you do that is I think some of those mismatches play out differently at the other end. Offensively, when those guys are trying to keep up with Caleb Battle, with Nolan, with, Stromer has started to drive and finish inside a little more the last month or so. As you watch that game, Foxy, you could kind of see the chess pieces going. And then late in the half, the Zags scored, I think, the last 5, took a 3-point lead into halftime, came out smoking in the second half, which we haven't seen a lot of. They kind of had these slow starts from time to time. In that game, they took it by the throat and took off. Biggest thing to me was when Ryan Nemhard had 2 fouls, went to the bench almost halfway through the half. You saw, Nolan run the show again, which he did a couple years ago as the point guard, do it very well. Fans kind of have this love-hate with Nolan. I'm not sure why exactly, but a little bit reminds me of Perkins back in the day. But the kid hardly ever turns it over, and he's been a 40% 3-point shooter most of his last couple of years here. And he's just kind of a very efficient, solid point guard. Nowhere near as flashy as Ryan. Totally different styles. Caleb got some ball screens in there too. They ran a few things for him, especially the last play of the half where he took it coast to coast. Tough finish. I thought that was the biggest stretch of the game. If Wazoo pulls
Yep.
up 7 or 8, maybe things are different. But Nolan handled it, kept going in the second half. Nemhard came back, did his thing. I thought handling that stretch and then the adjustments, it seemed like Gonzaga took off in those final 25 minutes.
Yeah, we at least on our broadcast, we tracked the last 21 possessions of the first half with Ryan out, just one turnover for Gonzaga. I thought
Wow.
it's as good as Nolan's played all season. His numbers obviously stand out. Played 38 minutes, 19 points, really efficient, 7 of 10 from the field, made 5 threes. He had 7 rebounds, just really
Tied
competed
his
on the
career high.
glass. Yep. Had 3 assists, just the 1 turnover. I think that's a really astute point about that stretch, is that was the stretch where WSU, because I mean, it was just a frustrating kind of experience when WSU didn't turn it over. They were scoring or getting good shots, but they had 12 turnovers in the first half.
Yeah.
They cleaned that up in the second half. I think they had a couple quick ones to start the second half, which didn't help them. But then they shored up the ball. But a lot of those turnovers they were live ball turnovers, allowed Gonzaga to turn it, get out in transition. Not necessarily turnovers because of Gonzaga's pressure or scheme. Gonzaga elected to have Battle or Stromer guard Eric Strupp. Very perimeter centric, big, not good length, 6'10", 6'11", but not necessarily a guy with a ton of size. And I can tell you, sometimes it's harder to post up those undersized guys because they have a lower center of gravity than you do. And so it's easier. It feels like they're pushing you out further than you want to go. And I thought both of those kids worked really hard to do that. And it felt like to me when WSU saw that defensive matchup, they tried to force it in a way that it became obsessive. And they, other than that first initial duck in, they just had a real tough time. Either it was a turnover, took away from what they were trying to do. Stromer had a block on Eric Strupp on a catch on the left block, and it felt like it was it took away from the fact that WSU could score without focusing on that matchup. Yeah. And 12 turnovers against a Gonzaga team, they're just going to make you pay. And you have to look back on that. I think if you're WSU, if we keep that down to 6, 7, 8 turnovers, that's 4, 5, 6 extra possessions that we have to try to score. And I think that was the difference in the first half. It was not just that Nolan kept the train on the tracks. It was just WSU's inability to protect the ball. Didn't allow them to take advantage of what I thought they had a good game plan in the first half. I mean, they moved the ball. They
a very nice offensive system.
They do, and they're all effectively everyone they play can score.
I know.
They're unselfish. They swing the ball. They do a really good job of getting the ball into the paint, whether it be with the post touch or they'll drive, force you to collapse. They kick it out to shooters. They're a lot of fun to watch. I mean, Riley's a very good coach. They have an identity, but they just kept coughing it up. I mean, I'm in my mind, I'm thinking of 3 or 4 where there was no need for it. I mean, Watts bobbles it at the top of the key. Gregg takes it, goes down the court, little shuffle pass to Battle for 2. Price tries to throw it over the top to Eric Strupp. It goes out of bounds. Just those types of turnovers that, you add them all up together. By the end of the night, they're just brutal. So, I mean, it was a fun game. It felt like a rivalry game immediately. I'm not sure it's really a rivalry yet, but certainly you can see as they get into the Pac-12, for certainly the next couple of years, but as they get into Pac-12 together, that is going to be a game every year, a couple games every year that are going to be very intense. It was a very physical game. The officials certainly let them play. And as a fan and as someone calling the game, it's a lot of fun. It's certainly a lot better than just a whistle fest. So I thought it lived up to the hype, despite the bad loss for WSU. And Gonzaga's, just wasn't their offensive production into the second half it was an avalanche. And it felt like towards the end there, just WSU doesn't have enough horses. You put Coward and Watts on that team, that is
Whole
a
different
very
team.
good team. Yeah.
No, and you were right, Foxy. We talked about it last week where you mentioned there would be pockets of WSU fans pretty well represented, and there were a lot of Cougar gear in there that I wasn't quite expecting, right around behind the bench even, and in the lower bowl, so that they were well represented in the crowd. That team is if that team, as you mentioned, had Coward and the other Watts, Isaiah Watts, makes them tough. And you addressed it too. Cal Mace can get inside and finish.
Yeah, he's a good looking player.
And Watts can too. He's 6'6" and about 225, 230. And they like to isolate him and put him inside, when he can, or go off the bounce. You add two more that can do that. Look out. I do think they get the Watts kid back at some point.
Yeah. I heard towards the end of the month is when they're thinking. Yeah.
So you can see defending that team is going to be an issue because they all shoot the three, and they are all pretty decent 3-point shooters, and they have some creativity individually, and then they move the ball. There is not there's no easy out there. You can't say I'm not guarding him and I'm not guarding him. I can double on the. It's that they don't let you do that very often. So one other thing I forgot to mention that I should have. Dusty Stromer was huge in that first half. And Dusty does not put up the glamorous numbers. Very rarely is he in double figures, but he's been so solid on the defensive end. He's starting to get his confidence and take it to the rack more and finish in there, get fouled. And his three ball has always been, this year hovering around 40%, maybe even higher. He's been very steady with that. Just a guy you can put out there. And if he's not turning it over, he's had a few games where he turned it over, but for the most part, he takes care of the ball. He moves the ball, now showing some offensive initiative. And they needed him the other night. They were down Ryan Nemhard. He got some more playing time because of that. He came up with a big three at the end of the half. I think he scored maybe 8 in that half, something like that. I'd have to look.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you bring that up. We talked about that during the broadcast. So, I mean, against the Cougs, 24 minutes, really impactful in the first half. 8 points. Only took 5 shots, 2 of 5, 1 of 3 from the 3-point line, but got to the free throw line, 3 of 4. A couple rebounds, 2 blocks, 2 steals, or 3 steals, and just 1 turnover. We were looking at it going into the game. First 14 games of the season, he was averaging about 5.5 points a game, taking about 4 shots a game, and shooting a good percentage, 48, 49% from 3. The 3 game going into the Coug game, he's averaging 8 a game, taking nearly 8 shots a game. Now his percentage is way down. He was 4 of 21 from 3 over those 3 games. But the point is, you like the fact that he's being aggressive, and it's the best way I think I can describe the shifts that appears to be happening with Stromer is he's been a spot up shooter and a ball mover. If he's not wide open on a kick out, he's not looking to do anything other than move the ball, make the solid play, and he's cut without the ball, that kind of thing. It feels now like if he catches the ball, he's looking to do something with it. Mm-hmm. And if the 3-point shot's not there, he had a great play in the first half on the left side of the floor where the ball gets kicked out to him. I think it's why not closes out, pump fake, 1-2 dribbles into the lane. And you see, he's a good athlete, all a 6'6", rises up, a little floater about 8-10 feet from the basket. And then he had another drive on the baseline where he got fouled by Okafor. It's just he looks more assertive, comfortable. They don't need him to take 12 shots a game. That's not his job. But what they do need him to do is to look to score. And it feels like he's looking to do that in a different way than he had been before. And that's a really big plus for Gonzaga.
He did that. You remember in the Craziness in the Kennel, he had 2 or 3 drives to the rim, and it was like, oh, Dusty did some off-season work here and is really more aggressive. And then here in the last month, he's really starting to show that. Gives them another element that they, have to worry about. He does what they ask him to do. He hits threes. He's solid defensively. very much a position defender, I would say. He's not, you don't see him get beat on back cuts very often unless he gets nailed by a screen or something. He's rarely out of position. And if he adds that element, that's a big deal. A little bit of K-lift there that he can go off the bounce. It's one more thing to worry about. And he's such a more complete player than he was a year ago already. And if that keeps coming, you're going to see him take that next step, next year where he is, those numbers will look pretty glamorous, I think. And they're big this year, very big. Braden Huff, 10 points in that second half. Another thing we failed to mention, pretty quiet in the first half, but he came alive in the second half as well. A good sign for Braden, because that was a big front line he was dealing with, and he has just that soft touch. And ever since you talked about his shot, I always watch his shot now. It is kind of a shot push shot, and not a ton of spin, but it is soft up on the rim, and it does go in. So the Zags really got pretty good contributions from almost everybody who played.
Yeah.
And next month, when they play in Pullman,
Well,
they're going to be 8,000 or 9,000 down there waiting, Foxy.
yeah, I think I might even make the trip. And I'm not calling it. Yeah, it was a good example. Michael, he had a couple good plays in the first half where he made good decisions with the ball and moved it, and it led to made threes. But in the second half, he just didn't seem like he was himself. I mean, and he obviously had a tough stretch there in the second half, and Mark took him out, and we didn't see him again. But it's a good example of Gonzaga's depth up front is just it's overwhelming. It's like a boxer that beats you by just leaning on you for 12 rounds. And that was we highlighted that in our open and throughout the game was just this is an interesting matchup. It's a matchup of different styles. If you look at Eric Strupp and Price, very perimeter centric, good size. I mean, Price 6'9", 6'10", thick. Eric Strupp 6'11" or so, a little more wiry, but 220, 230, whatever he is. But they really hurt you from three. I mean, going into the game, Price was averaging nearly 20 a game and shooting 55% from three, taking 5 a game.
Yeah.
And then he had 3 games with over 20. And then Eric Strupp was averaging about 14 a game, shooting 40% from three, but he took on average 8 a game.
Yeah.
And they needed both of them to play well. Eric Strupp, obviously, he took 13 shots, just 5 of 13, 1 of 5 from 3, 11 points. They certainly wanted to take advantage of his length inside. I thought to their detriment eventually. But Price, it was just really interesting. Only took 4 shots.
Yeah.
2 points, missed both the 3 he took. It just didn't seem like either one of them, particularly Price, ever got their footing in the game. And I think part of that is you go down the other end, and it's just relentless. And you look at the combination of Gregg, Huff, and Ike, 42 points between them. They shoot 17 of 24, better than 70% from the field, and it doesn't stop. Right? There's no let up. You're taking one of those 2 off. Here comes Huff, who may not be as good in some areas, but he's sure as hell just as good at scoring the ball.
Yeah.
Right?
He can flat score.
Yeah, you're just constantly having to defend around the basket. And that was a really physical game, which I don't think is the style that either one of those kids would prefer to play. So, Huff's the last couple of games, it feels like he comes in and it's lightning in a bottle, and they're leaning on Graham more so for longer stretches in games. But when he comes in, he's having an impact scoring the ball immediately. And that's a real luxury.
Well, and one thing I think I mentioned in the buzzer breakdown that we said right at the buzzer, those bigs had 11 assists.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yep.
Ben Gregg had 5 assists. I think Graham had 3.
Yeah.
Michael had 2 right out of the gate.
Yep.
And then he had a turnover, maybe a bad shot, and Huey called timeout to get him out of there. He was not pleased. But Benny Gregg's been on a great stretch. He has 11, 9, 5 assists, 23 or something against San Diego. He is really kind of having I think he's sees the finish line his senior year, and he wants to hit it going full speed. So,
Well, think about it. Since he's been a starter, he's playing 27 minutes a game, averaging over 11.7 rebounds, shoots it at over 60% clip from the field. He's 4 of 8 from three, obviously 3 of those against USD, but the ball's starting to go in.
yeah.
9 assists, 6 steals, and only 4 turnovers. It's just, there's something, I wonder if he had one more year of eligibility, would they wait to start him until about this time of year again? Like,
I don't think so.
putting
Yeah,
him in the lineup is, last year and this year, last year it was very pronounced and very evident immediately that it was the right decision and he was going to have a real impact. This year, maybe more subtle, but there is something about him on the floor. There's a connectivity he provides, and I think he's a better fit next to Graham than Michael was. And you're bigger. You're bigger. You're different, but you're bigger with both of them on the floor to start games. I'm just happy for him, and I think more importantly, it's better for this group to have him in that starting lineup.
yeah. I mean, numbers support all that, but you can just watch it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Excuse me. Both ends of the court. I mean, defensively, you cannot work harder than Benny Gregg does. And so does Mike. Mike plays his tail off. It's not always going his way, but I still think his time, I still think he'll have a good finish. And Benny hitting that three, whole different ball game when they're collapsing on Graham. And well, let's get to the week ahead. We got 2 games, 2 pretty good games. Oregon State Thursday in Corvallis, Santa Clara Saturday at the McCarthy Athletics Center. That's the jersey retirement ceremony. I guess you can't call it a retirement ceremony. The jersey appreciation ceremony for Domus Sabonis coming back. Let's start with Oregon State. The Beavers own the series against Gonzaga. I think I read it was 25-2, but they haven't played since 1991. So put that in perspective. A lot of those were the Ralph Miller era, I would guess. And before Gonzaga really got onto the national scene, they had Santa Clara down at the end of the game and gave up a putback, I want to say, and lost in conference. But they came back and clobbered Pacific 91-55. And that was a couple nights after Pacific had won at WSU. So this is a pretty capable team. Their stats, if you look at their shooting numbers, their 3-ball, their free throw percentage, very similar to Gonzaga's, very similar. And Wazoo's a bit like that as well. There's not much difference in those percentages. Now, they didn't play the non-conference schedule that the Zags did with, 5 or 6 teams ranked or at least receiving votes. But I think there was a method to Wayne Tinkle's madness there. I think he wanted his team to get on the winning track and experience that and come together that way, as opposed to playing head knockers every other time out. So, and I think it worked. They've got a great record. I think they're right there in the conference standings. It's pretty cluttered at the top. Santa Clara's made a move towards the top as well. I think they only have 1 loss in conference. So, but this team, much like the last few that the Zags have had, Michael Rattay, I think it's pronounced, 6'9", 225. He has first team all WCC numbers right now. Very productive. They've got a big kid in the middle, Parsa Fala, that is 6'9", maybe 250 or 60. Very good mix of wings, guards, DeMarco Minor, Nate Kings. They got a 6'7" Lithuanian that I will not even pretend to pronounce, even though I have it in front of me. He's a very good player. This is a nice mix of players playing at home, going to be amped up for the Zags like everybody gets on the road. And that inside game, some other teams have had the size inside. This team has the size and production inside. How do you see that matchup going with Gonzaga's bigs? Obviously, that's the strength of their team as well. How do you see that lineup, that matchup on Thursday in Corvallis?
Well, Oregon State is enormous. I mean, they are really big.
I think there's a
they've got.
7-footer off the bench, I want to say, too.
Well, I mean, I think they got 7-footers that don't play. I mean,
Yeah.
like they could just put them out there if they want to. DeMarco Minor. I mean, he's 6 foot. Joshua Lake is 6'2", and then all of a sudden you're 6'5", 6'5", 6'6", 6'8". I mean, they've got two 7-footers on the roster: 6'10", 6'11", 6'9", and their bigs can play. I mean, Marsh is coming off the bench, I believe, 7-footer, 250. Doesn't stretch it, doesn't play a ton, but he's a big body. He's going to come in, and I think it's going to be a test for Gonzaga around the basket. Michael, how'd you pronounce his name? Ratajay or
I think it's Ratai.
Ratai. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, don't hold me to that, but I think so.
He's an all-league guy, stretches it out 35% from three, averaging 17 and 9.
Yeah.
Pretty skilled. Parsha is a transfer, I think, from Southern Utah. He's kind of physically profiles like Graham. I mean, he's 6'9", 260. He doesn't shoot it. So, they shoot the ball well from three. They're solid defensively. It's just you're on the road. It's a good example of just how the top half of this league has gotten stronger. Yeah. And there are less gimmies than there had been. And certainly Gonzaga's a better team. I think their talent is better, but this is not by any stretch of imagination a game that Gonzaga is just going to walk in there and roll through the Beavers. I mean, this is a game they certainly could lose, particularly on the road.
Yeah. Okay, I'll take a shot. Lila Vicious is the Lithuanian.
Yeah.
Nice player, versatile player.
I'm not calling an Oregon State game this year, so I'm not going to try it.
Yeah, like I said, don't hold me to the pronunciations, but just one of those guys that, he can shoot the three, has some length and range to him that the Zags are probably going to have to guard with smaller defenders. I've done a great job with that, but they better keep doing a great job with that, because they're going to see the same thing Saturday. You've got Adama Ball is in that 6'6", 6'7" range and can shoot it a little and score it and create. So I really am kind of looking forward to this game. Wayne Tinkle's the coach there. I think he grew up in Spokane, played high school ball here. He's coached all over the West Coast and Montana. Does a great job there, and been there. I think this is 11th year. So I'm hoping to talk to Wayne tomorrow, kind of pick his brain. But I've been impressed when I've watched him. I watched him play in a tournament in Hawaii. They look connected, and they have playmakers. They do have the size, obviously, guys who can put it inside and score it, or even from the outside like Ratai. But those guards. Kings and Minor they can do things. They can shoot it a little and they can bounce it a little. So I think it's going to be a real challenge.
And they're good at home. This is let me get on my soapbox. This is what drives me crazy about the WCC is you want the league to be better than it is, right? And so you bring in WSU and Oregon State, and you think, perfect, right? I mean, you want it to be a better test. You want Gonzaga to have to sweat things out and to be tested. And then you look at WSU loses at home to Pacific. Oregon State loses by 21 on the road to LMU. They lose by 1 to Santa Clara. Santa Clara is one of the better teams in the league. That's not a bad loss, but it's just frustrating because that's such a bad loss for Oregon State on the road at LMU. We saw LMU the other week. It's such a bad loss for WSU at home against Pacific, right? It weakens their resume as a result. It weakens the conference as a result. It weakens the quality of win that Gonzaga could maybe realize. Yeah. But what it also tells me is that these teams, Oregon State's a good team, but they're inconsistent, and that can be disconcerting when you're going down to play them because you don't which team are we going to play. Yeah, right. And so Oregon State at their best can clip Gonzaga. I mean, they have legitimate size, they have legitimate guards, they shoot it well enough. They're one of the best steals teams in the league, if not the best. They have a lot of the same profile as Gonzaga, but is that the team Gonzaga's playing on Thursday night, or are they going to play the team that, so it's just hard to know. But I think if Oregon State's playing the way that they can, it's going to be a good test.
Well, and a lot of these guys are actually returners that they kept and have groomed and have gotten better. They played Pac-12 competition last year. There's not going to be any, fear of playing a ranked team or anything like that. They've played great teams, so they know what they're in for. And their top end of play is very good. Beat anybody in this conference or probably even in the old Pac-12. He's got a nice crew down there. So anxious to see that game Saturday back home. Zags catching Santa Clara just as the Broncos are kind of developing into the team I thought they would be. I like their personnel. For 4 or 5 years now under Herb Sendak, the veteran coach, they have got very good pieces, sent guys to the NCAA, legitimate size inside, and a kind of a stretch guy that can shoot 3 balls. But the main guys, Adama Ball, I think it's Adama Alpha Ball is how he goes by now. But he beat the Zags a couple years ago with the late bucket. I got a kid named Mahi that's from Toronto, so I'm guessing Ryan Nemhard has crossed paths with him at some point. He might be a year younger than Ryan, but size inside with Tilly, not Killian, but another foreign player. I think he might be from Germany, if I'm not mistaken. But Carlos Stewart, Brian, another guard that I think hit the game winner against Oregon State. They go about 8 or 9 deep, 3 or 4 bigs, 2 good wings, 2 good guards, a backup guard that isn't playing near as much as he did a year ago. The personnel is there, and it looks like they're starting to figure it out. I don't know how much you've seen of them, but kind of the size and skill to give Gonzaga a test.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about, I usually have Santa Clara, certainly at home, but I've had them on the road. And I mean, I'm trying to think about the last time they played Gonzaga close at home. I mean, I think it's been a while.
No, they got them. Oh, here you mean?
Yeah, no, yeah. In Spokane, yeah.
Okay.
And I'm curious. It feels like they're going to be due to just put it together up here. Ball's a good player. To your point, he's got good size. The ball's in his hands a lot. He just kind of good all around. I'm not so worried about Gonzaga matching up with him, but they just have a nice collection of guards. They're all solid. Sendik's a really good coach. And it feels like they've been on the cusp here for a while. And, that university, in a way that I think most others in the conference have not, has invested into athletics and basketball specifically. I mean, you look at their facility now and, what they've done. They have good size. They've got skilled players up front. Yep. To your point, Tilly's a 7-footer. He's really physical. He's got the ability to step out. Doesn't take a ton of them, about 2 a game, but shoots almost 40% from 3. O'Neal, another guy who can shoot. It takes about 36 from 3, but he's also got good size. Carlos Stewart left.
Another big.
Yep. So, Stewart's a good player. I think he left, didn't he? He came back.
I think he left and came back after a year at LSU or something.
Yep. So, I think for me, Jim, I kind of got to see it to believe it at the kennel. I wish I would have thought of that. I would have looked the last few years to see kind of. I mean, last year I believe was just an annihilation. A year before that too. So
one of those was closer. One of them was a pretty good game.
I'm gonna look at it now. So I mean, I think it's.
Well, what they have, Foxy, while you're looking that up, they have. Ball can go get 20, 25. I think Stewart might have had 25 and a half here recently. And they're coming in. They took apart San Francisco, lost to them earlier in the year at USF, took them apart in the second half. They scored 56 in the second half and 1 going away. I think that's just USF's second conference loss. But they have balanced scoring, but they have the kind of guys that can go throw 20, 25 up, 3 or 4 different guys. You mentioned O'Neal can shoot it.
Yeah.
They have some fouls they can eat up inside. So I'm expecting them. I don't even know who they have Thursday, but I'm expecting them. They are kind of trending in the right direction. I'm expecting them to show up with a lot of confidence on Saturday.
Yeah, they're playing. They're at LMU, and yeah, I'm looking at it now. I mean, they've last 3 years they've lost on average by 14. So,
Okay.
um,
Reasonably close. Yeah.
yeah. That's and I call a lot of blowouts, so please forgive me.
No, I'm right there with you, man.
Uh, no,
Let's
look,
go.
it's a good week for Gonzaga, man. I mean,
It
it's
is.
just you're on the road against I think a game Oregon State team, and then you come home and um, this Santa Clara is a solid team. You have to beat Santa Clara. They're not going to beat themselves.
That's a good way of putting it. You're probably going to read this in a Spokesman-Review newspaper coming to you tomorrow, but this is kind of a good stretch on the schedule for the Zags where they're going to have a lot of these quad 1, quad 2 games. They play Santa Clara, Oregon State this week. They just played Washington State, which is 75 in the net, so that's still a quad 2 when they played here. They got Oregon State again, and then the first game against St. Mary's is February 1st. That should be, depending on where the Gales are, probably be at least one quad 1 and then maybe 2. I think they have to stay in the top 30 is the cutoff when they come to the kennel. So there's going to be a lot of quad 1, quad 2 games coming. Last topic. We'll do it real quick. Hardly mentioned Graham Ike at all in the Wazoo game. He only led them in scoring with 21, hit 5 rebounds. If you listen to the show, we expect a lot out of Graham. We nitpick him at points because he's missing closer range shots, particularly the first month of the season. Those seem to be going down now. San Diego chose to, grab an arm instead of letting him finish inside and send it in the line. Well, he's making more free throws now. He has kind of become exactly what we thought, All-American level center. 9 fouls he drew in that game. People don't quite get how much stress that puts on. Even the best teams the Zags played, you don't see depth in the bigs like Gonzaga has. Very few teams do. It's hard to get one good big, let alone 3 or 4. But he puts a lot of foul pressure on folks. His rise here, he's played better defensively. I'm willing to say if you sit courtside, which I think we did down at PEP and at LMU, you can see how communication is big to him now and how more vocal he has got. 19 rebounds the other day. This kid is making, I think he's helping Gonzaga take another step here. The level of play is as good as he's had. And he had a great stretch last year where he's scoring in the 20s all the time. Maybe not quite as high scoring, but both ends. I think he's made a jump, and that is reflected on the whole team and they're playing better because of it.
Yeah, look, at some point, you go through the list of Gonzaga bigs that have played under Mark Few and narrow down to centers. And whatever list you're putting together for the best centers he's ever had, Graham Ike is on that list. I'm not saying he's the best ever, but he is up very high on that list. I mean, we were talking about it going into the game against WSU, so I don't know how his numbers have adjusted, but the previous 7 games, he was averaging over 19 points a game, 9.5 rebounds, shooting 62% from the field, 7 of 9 for the 3-point line. So all of a sudden he's feeling it from behind the 3-point line. And that doesn't even account to your point about the number of fouls he's drawing on teams. And he's making his free throws. So, I think what's the nitpicking, another way to probably describe how you and I maybe sometimes talk about Graham is just, it's a curiosity when he doesn't have a game like you'd expect, just because he's that good, and I just don't think you can say enough about him. He's an anchor for them inside. He solves a lot of their problems. He's gotten better at handling double teams. We saw that against WSU. We saw that against San Diego. He takes his time. And he's just a bit of a safety valve. And his connection and chemistry with Ryan is as good as any pair that Mark's ever had. I mean, they just know how to play with each other. So, and I think that's an astute point about Graham defensively. He is not a shot blocker. He's not a guy who bothers people around the rim, at least not very often. But what he is, he's a very good positional defender. He's good on the weak side, and you can't really post him up. I mean, he's so strong. You have to almost get him on the move, excuse me, to try to create an angle. You're not backing him down. So I think the world of him. You and I both got to know him a little bit. You certainly more than I off the court. Just a thoughtful guy, has a great perspective. It doesn't ever seem like he gets too up or too down, either about himself or the team. Maybe I said it last week, I think, when he's animated and you can see it, you know what you're going to get from him. And he has been animated here the last, 3 or 4 weeks. And he certainly was against WSU. And I love when I see him chirping at players. He'll holler at these officials sometimes. And you're like, hey, like he's getting awfully close to get into the line. But when he's in that mode and that mindset, he is as good a center as you're going to find in the country.
Well, and again, like I said with Ben Gregg, I think you're seeing a lot of this on this team because they're so old. You've got Nemhard Sr., Hickman Sr., Graham Sr., Ben Gregg Sr. That finish line is, depending on how long they go in March, isn't far away. I mean, they're kind of playing, it feels like to me, they're all like, hey, we got to hit the throttle here. We're running out of time for what we want to do. And it's a group that's good enough to do some real things here next month and beyond. So we'll see. That's going to do it for this week. Foxy, always enjoy it. Christy Burns, thank you as always. I will post this on the Spokesman-Review website. You can find the podcast there, every one of the podcasts there. I think at last count, we've got 37 hours of enjoyment for viewers if they'd like to go back through the whole catalog. Not even I can recommend that, Foxy.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't do that to anybody.
It's on YouTube. It's on Apple Podcasts. You can find us if you just punch in Zags Basketball Insiders Podcast. So have a good week, everybody. We'll be back next Monday to recap it all. Thanks for joining us.